In this video, I'm going to show you how to pour and finish your own concrete sidewalk, and you can get it done for about half the price by doing it yourself. My mom recently paid some neighborhood kids to dig up her old flagstone patio that was in really bad shape. She had a few companies quote out a new concrete sidewalk and she was shocked at the price. I shared with her that my son and I could take care of it for about half the cost, so she said go for it. The digging was already done for the most part except for refining the curves, and since I'm going with curves, I'm using 1x4 PVC board because it's easy to bend. I'm using wooden stakes as needed along the perimeter of the form to support it well, and I'm making sure that the stakes are below the top edge of the form. It's best practice to make sure that concrete always slopes away from the house. To ensure I'm maintaining about a 1/4 inch of drop, I use my level to check every few feet. I did the entire run on the house side first because there was things like this sidewalk that needed to tie into. Then I did the other side and I just measure along and make sure that my width is consistent. A screw locks it in place and it looks a little high to me, and I grab the level here to make sure I have slope, and you can see where I raise on the left hand side. That's how much off it is to make it have drop. The teenagers that my mom hired to remove the previous flagstone patio and dig it out did a fairly decent job, but I found there was a lot of high spots and I wanted to have a consistent 7 to 8 inches across the entire project. Next step is gravel, and I really wanted to get the video of this massive machine loading my trailer, but they told me for safety reasons I had to sit in the car, so I got it through the rear view camera. If you don't have a trailer, you can always have it delivered, or if it's a smaller project, you can pick up bags of gravel at your local home center. Gravel is graded by size, and if you have a choice, I prefer size 8. It's smaller and the shovel goes into it easier, and it's easier to spread around. Generally, you'll also hear people using size 57, which is a little bit larger rock. Both do the same thing. It's all about drainage. The goal here is to get the gravel slightly above the bottom edge of the form. The next step is to compact the gravel so that the concrete doesn't settle over time. You can use a hand tamper, but for this project I rented a power compactor and it was a nice luxury. It does a quick job of compacting down, and whenever there was low spots, I would add a little bit of gravel and go back over it again. Today it's day 2 and I have my son Cameron helping me out, and we're excited to use our new toy, which is a mud mixer, and it does the same thing as hand mixing but just a lot faster, so I'm excited to try that out. Rebar or wire mesh is used in concrete to maintain strength and to reduce cracking. I'm using 3/8 inch rebar for this project, and I'm drilling into the side of the existing slab. This driveway is about 50 years old, so I know any settling has already occurred, so I feel comfortable tying into it. If you're connecting into a newer pour, I'd recommend looking up the foam isolation strips that you can get, and you just let it float free. Here I'm laying out the rebar in basically a railroad track type format. I got a little lazy at the home center and actually bought the short ones pre-cut to length, which you pay a lot more for it, but it saves a lot of time. To lock the rebar in place, we're using a wire tool and these little curved wires that you can get at the same place that sells the rebar. It's quick and easy, and you also can use tie wraps for a smaller job. Metal screening is also considered acceptable as a reinforcement for concrete, but one of the things I don't like about it is it's bulky, it's hard to get back to the job site, and it's a lot more cutting. I would be more prone to use it on a driveway or a larger pour because you're not going to have to cut the shape of a sidewalk. We continued out to the flared edge of the sidewalk, which was a little bit wider, so we decided to do 2 pieces of rebar and tie them together in the center. The sidewalk runs along the side of an existing stoop about halfway down. I used my hammer drill to drill some more holes in the side and insert some rebar so we could tie that in there as well. And perfect timing, Cameron's finishing up on the very last wire tie. The next step is to create a straight edge that will be used in the pouring process. I'm cutting a 2x4 a little longer than the width of my sidewalk. And now it's time for the fun stuff. It's time to start the pour. We have a new toy called the mud mixer, and I'm so excited to use it. Keep in mind we're using the same bag concrete you can get at a home center, and you just have to mix it with a trowel and in the conventional way in a wheelbarrow. But this way saves so much time. This machine can do 45, 80-pound bags in an hour. It's a great time saver, and it is available at some rental stores. It's important to get concrete at the right consistency. You don't want it too dry and you don't want it too wet. The concrete bags have a ratio mixture on the instructions to give you a guideline of how much water to add. The great thing about the mud mixer machine is there's a little dial on the front that you can adjust exactly the amount of water that's being mixed with the concrete. At the start, we played around a lot with this dial. You can see how now it's getting a little bit too wet, and we had to go back and forth to get it just at the right place. But once you have it set, you don't have to worry about it anymore. We quickly found it's good to keep about 3 to 4 bags in the hopper because it comes out so fast, and that way you're able to concentrate on just getting the concrete in the right locations. But it was a constant job for Cameron to run back and forth with the 80-pound bags. Another option for concrete is to have a concrete delivery truck come with a chute and actually place it for you. But some drawbacks for us on that is we would only have half of what the minimum requirement is for a delivery, so I'd pay double for the concrete. And also it's hard for a truck to get back into places like this. You also risk damaging the existing concrete driveway. Concrete trucks are extremely heavy and they test the limits of any existing concrete that you may have at your house. At this point, I feel like we were getting in the groove of the machine, loading it, and also pouring it, and we had our pattern down. What we were trying to do is get the concrete to be slightly above the level of the form on each side. This allows, when I use my straight edge and I pull it across, I can just keep seeing where a low spot is. We could fill it in, and just going back and forth in a rocking motion, you can quickly see any low spots you have. The goal here is not to get it perfect. The goal is to get it to where you see you have consistent coverage across from one side of the form to the other. You can see now why it's so important that your stakes that you put down on the forms not stick above the side of the form. It makes it a lot easier to slide your straight edge across each side of the form. Definitely was a challenge working around all the existing landscaping and structures that were already existing at the house. A tip definitely would be to make sure that your path is as wide as your mud mixer machine or wheelbarrow that you'll be delivering the concrete with, because if not, it's really hard to get it into place. It's best practice to have the rebar suspended in the middle of the concrete pour, and to do this you either have to have it already sitting on blocks when you pour, or you can pull it up as you go along, and that's the method we used because we had to roll the mud mixer over the rebar as we poured. You can see here where Cameron's filling in my low spots that are obvious when I use the straight edge. Having two people makes this process a lot easier because I'm able to stay down with the straight edge and not have to get up and back down. Also, you may notice Cameron's wearing rubber boots, which is nice because you can just walk through the concrete and not even worry about it. Another important tip that I have not shown is that before we laid the concrete down, we did spray the gravel with water. This keeps the gravel from not sucking the moisture out of the concrete too early before it cures. We're doing this on a mild, fairly overcast day, so we didn't have to spray too much to keep it damp. On a hot sunny day, you'd have to spray much more often. This was a tricky location for us for a couple of reasons. One, there was a wasp's nest on the right-hand post. Cameron's already been stung twice. We had all these things in our way. We even ran out of electrical cord at this point, and the mixer needed to be moved. So this was a tight section. It's now time to use the mag float, and the mag float purpose is to bring the cream to the top, they say in the industry. It's to push the gravel down and make sure it's not sitting proud, and you're basically sealing the concrete. You know when you're ready for this step when the concrete only goes down about 1/4 inch when you touch it with your finger. I continue using the mag float on the portion that we'd already completed, and I was kind of in a mad rush because the sun came out and it started curing, so I sprayed the top with water to buy a little time. Now it's back to the same method of using the straight edge and filling in the voids. You can quickly tell after doing just a little bit of concrete what the perfect consistency is. I'm sure you can tell even in the video how much better it's flowing. It's not too piled up and it's not too watery. It's just going perfectly into place at this point. So make sure you pay attention to your mixture ratio of water to concrete mix, and once you get it dialed in, just stay with that formula. Even though we're only halfway down the length of the sidewalk at this point, I felt like we were almost done because we'd passed the gate where the wasp's nest was and all the places that were hard to work around. I managed to not get stung, so I was glad to get past this point. Now that we're in a more open space, we were able to put the mud mixer next to the pour, and we were able to utilize the rotating head, which will rotate 360 degrees just like a concrete truck. You get to keep it in place and just rotate it around. Concrete is really sensitive to temperature, and I could tell a big difference in now that it's warming up. It's about 2 o'clock. I had to get out the mag float sooner than I did before. I just go across the surface and I'm making sure that all of the gravel that's came up to the top is pushed down, and the more you go across it, the more you almost start seeing a water that comes up to the top, and you just keep going back and forth. Try not to put any lines in there. We'll be broom finishing this pretty soon, and I'll show you that process. Here we ran into a slight problem when our mud mixer wouldn't fit between the rock garden wall and the new poured wall, so we had to kind of just improvise and pick it up a little bit and get it past this point, which wasn't too bad, but definitely needed two people. We made it to the flared end of the sidewalk. I like to flare out each side because when you approach it, you don't have to turn it at a 90-degree angle. You can just walk onto the sidewalk naturally. The sidewalk is wider than my straight edge at this point, so what I did was I just overfilled it slightly all the way around, and then I cut a wider 2x4 and used that as a straight edge to screed in the same way that I did on the rest of the sidewalk. And now it's time to go back to the mag float and get it to the same place that I have the rest of the sidewalk. One thing that's for sure in life is all concrete will crack, and that's the purpose of putting lines or grooves in the concrete. Every 2.5 to 3 feet, I use a grooving tool with a 2x4 beside it as a straight edge. I just go back and forth in multiple passes, raising up as I go forward and raising up as I go back so I don't dig into the concrete. Finding the right time to do the grooving process can make this a lot easier. If it's too dry, you can pick out some of the concrete, and I had to place it back on. And if it's too wet, you sink in too much. So a good tip is to wait to the right time, and if it's too dry, you can always spray it lightly with water to reactivate it. The next step is to apply what is referred to as a broom finish. A broom finish gives a sidewalk traction and also can mask some slight errors that you may have made with the mag float. Just want to make sure you maintain the same direction and also spray the broom off every few passes so you don't have concrete accumulate. We allowed a few days for the concrete to cure, and it was time to remove the forms. I used a pry bar and I was trying to find a weak place, and it took a little while to find a place that was free enough to get my leverage. Once I found that location, I started pulling and it came up rather easily. The nice thing about PVC is it does not stick to the concrete and it's fairly easy to get it off. If you're using 2x4s, you may want to look into, there's different types of things you can spray on it to keep it from sticking to the concrete. Some people apply oil, and there's also some sprays that people use. As I finished taking up the rest of the forms, Cameron grabbed some leftover topsoil from the previous dig out to fill in all the gaps from where the forms set between the grass and the sidewalk. Concrete is stronger when it cures slower. To slow down the cure, you can keep the concrete wet for the next few days, especially in the summer. Just spraying it off a few times a day will slow it down. You can reduce the amount of times it needs to be sprayed by applying sheet plastic over it after it's wet down. Once that process is complete, you have one more step, and that's to apply a sealer, and then you're done and you can enjoy your new sidewalk. Be sure to check out the links in my description for more information on the things that we talked about, and good luck on your sidewalk project.